I'm standing on the start line of a marathon. I'm hooked up to a continuous glucose monitor, so we've got real-time evidence. And today we're going to talk about fueling in a marathon, the science behind it, but we know also that it doesn't begin here. Marathon fueling starts way before the start line, so we've got to go back before we can go over this line. Look at these crowds.
Okay, there's two parts to this fueling thing. There's how we fuel for life generally and how we carb load. So let's go part one, how we fuel for life generally. We tend to live our lives by 5 simple fueling principles that you can learn more about by watching this video or reading this book by Matt Fitzgerald. But when it comes to our fueling, we've got 5 rules. 1. Eat quality. Pretty self-explanatory. Most food cooked fresh and not processed. 2. Eat carb-centered. Not to be confused with carb-heavy, by the way, but carbs form the basis of most of our meals. 3. Eat enough. We make sure we properly fuel to ensure training is high quality, but not overeat. We try to tune into the body's signals. 4. Eat everything. We don't restrict a particular food group and we eat a bit of everything, even treat meals. A good healthy balance across all. 5. Eat individually. We've experimented enough to know what works for us. What foods make us feel good and make us perform well. Trial and error, of course, but everyone is different. So that's how we live our general life, fueling wise, but you want to know how you would fuel for a marathon. Right, let me try and break it down in 1 minute, as simply and as quickly as I can. First of all, follow Featherston Nutrition and Rosner Performance on Instagram, great sources of the science behind it and how to do it. Now, Mary followed a 3-day carb load, which means she was aiming to take in 8 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of her body weight for each of the 3 days. If you were a 100 kilogram human, you'd be looking at getting 800 grams each of the days in. I did a 2-day load, so it's a bit more aggressive. I was looking for 10 to 12 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. I'm 63 kilograms, give or take, so I'm looking at 630 grams of carbohydrates minimum. It's quite a lot. By the end, I was like pushing spaghetti into my mouth and it was falling back out. But the way that we found worked for us was you eat your normal breakfast, which had carbohydrates because it was oats, cereal, fruit, pasta or something for lunch, pasta or potatoes or something for dinner, and then in the periods through the day, things like bagels. Orange juice is a great source of carbohydrates in the form of fructose. Carbohydrate drinks from the likes of Bix or Tailwind. We were just keeping it topped up throughout the entire day, and that clearly worked for us when it came to the Chicago Marathon. And then on the morning of the race, it's just topping it up. It's having a breakfast, having orange juice, topping up those stores, off you go. In fact, off we go to the Buriram Marathon, which is like the craziest marathon in Thailand.
You're thinking, I already know how to fuel for a marathon. I've got a strategy that works for me, and it's something like bang a gel every 5 miles or gel every 45 minutes or whatever it is, and that's okay. But what I want to do in this video is talk you through the science so that maybe you can adapt or tweak your approach if it hasn't been working for you, or even if it has, to make it a little bit better. Intend to do is spend my entire marathon banging on about what I do, when I do it, why I do it, so that you can give it a go as well. We're just standing behind that's the 4-hour pace. We're aiming for a 4-hour marathon today because Mikey and Polly are pushing Coco in a buggy somewhere over there. Okay, here's the first thing to take into account when you're running in a marathon, and it's the gels don't hit quite as quickly as I think you think they're going to hit. So if you're standing on the start line with 5 minutes to go and you bang a gel, that's not going to hit for 20 to 25 minutes into the race, which might not be a problem, but I've always been a firm believer of keeping your glucose topped up the whole time, the carb levels up. So if you want to time it right, you want to be looking at taking a gel between 20 and 30 minutes before to have the peak of that hit for when you cross the start line. A proper party vibe here. We're actually running around the Chang race circuit. I think there's like a lot of car racing that goes on here. Why don't we address the misconception here on how many carbs you should be putting in an hour, because I think a lot of people, they really underfuel in the marathon, and again, the evidence is pretty overwhelming. You're looking at 80 to 100 grams of carbohydrates an hour, and think about it, in some gels there's 25 grams, 4 gels an hour. That's quite a lot. So you might be asking, how do I combat needing to get that much carbohydrate in my body with not being able to take 4 gels an hour? That's just insane. So number one is, a lot of the gel brands nowadays are making kind of 40 grams of carbohydrate type gels, where it's a bigger hit but for a similar sized packet. So I tend to rotate between a 40 gram and a 25 gram and take gels every 20 to 25 minutes when I'm giving it a full send. Not doing that today, but that way I'm looking at getting up to 80 just over per hour, near enough when you average it out. So I took my first gel at 30 minutes in. I think it was just gone 5k. It's about 7 p.m, right? So actually that should be hitting around now, because we're about 25 minutes later. So I think it's about, oh, there we go. I think it's about 7:25. So this is when I'm going to take my next gel. So as it's waning, as we're at the peak, I'll take another gel, should hit again. But this time I'm going to take a 40 gram gel, a Bix. Pretty much taking it bang on the 1 hour. As I say, if I was racing full send, I would have traditionally taken this way earlier. But I'm running very conservatively today because we're having a lovely time. We're 5 minutes away from taking our next gel. So let's touch on the importance of the timings. Rather than distance, I focus on time. And I'll tell you what, look at the crowds here. Hey! It's like a full party. So we take them every 20 in a race, 25. We're taking them every 30 today, and that's because time is pure. Time doesn't change, right? If you say you're going to take your gels every 5k, every 6k, every 5 miles, I can guarantee you this: a 5k at the start of your race probably is not going to take the same amount of time as a 5k at the end of the race, arguably when you're going to need it the most. So if you stick to time, it's really pure. You take them every 20 minutes, every 25 minutes, without fail. And then your fueling strategy can't go wrong. An hour and a half in, just over 17 kilometers in, and it's time to take the next gel. And I'm going to take, for comparison purposes, this time a Morton 40 grams. They're called Morton 160s. What will be interesting to me at the halfway stage is because I've taken gels every 30 minutes and not every 20 minutes, my suspicion, I don't know, I'll put the chart up on the screen in a minute, is that I'm not really taking advantage of keeping the glucose high. I suspect it's going in real peaks and troughs because I'm just leaving it a little bit too long between gel hits, but I don't know, it's just a feeling I get. Mikey's an absolute hero today. He's getting all the cheers. we're halfway, and what I feared might happen is going to happen. This blood glucose monitor, it's happened a couple of times in my 28 days of testing so far, but it just cannot handle the sweat, and it's coming loose. And I did try and really stick it down with plasters before we left, but you know, the rest of the points, I don't need a blood glucose monitor. I know enough, I know the science, and I'm hoping I'll still be able to help. So it is coming off. I'm going to stop it stabbing me in and out.
For some reason the microphone just decided not to work for this clip, but no worries, because I can show you some of the amazing Buriram Marathon course while I'm narrating. But the essential part of this point was that you need to practice with the gels that you're going to use on race day, or at least whatever fueling you're going to use, and whether that be gels with caffeine or not, it all makes a difference, because just grabbing gels at the side of the road, those that the race puts on, is never usually a good plan, usually a recipe for disaster, because it can cause a lot of gastrointestinal distress. And you know what, even with caffeine, if you haven't practiced with it properly and you start to take it during a race, it can go very pear-shaped. All you need to do is just ask Mary how that went in Seville. This is her telling you it didn't go well. But the basics is you can train your gut to take pretty much anything. So find gels that you know work for you and practice with them in training as much as possible, and take them with you on the course. Take no risks. You are not going to bring your best race out without a good fueling strategy.
One thing we haven't talked about yet when it comes to fueling is hydration, which is a really important part of it. And my strategy has always been and will always be get myself completely hydrated before the race. Make sure I kind of almost need to go to the loo at the start line, and then during the race I don't think I really have to worry about dehydration as such. Just need to keep topping it up rather than keeping myself out of the danger zone. I never feel like I dip too low. It's just top ups all the time, little and often. Actually, this is a point I could have made much earlier in the video, but I'll make it now because it's quite relevant. I'm running along, I've ticked over the half-hour mark where I'm supposed to take my gel, but I'm in a rhythm and I'm like, oh, I don't want to break it by faffing around. I don't feel like I need it. It's a trap. Hang on, let me turn the lights on. It's a trap. I do need it. I must have it. It's not for now, it's for a little bit later. So don't be lured into that feeling of like, I'm all right, I'll have it a little bit later. Trust me when I say this, I've been caught out before. So onto the Mortons again. Just making sure I'm keeping myself topped up is sensible. The marathon doesn't really start until 32 kilometers, so. And while we've got 8k to go, it's worth touching on the fueling needs of runners with different sized bodies, because let's be honest, we're looking around this marathon. Lots of runners of all different sizes. No less of runners, by the way, but everyone is different. And there's a recent scientific paper that's come out saying that runners over 70 kilograms actually require more fuel than less, even if they run at a lower intensity or slower, because their body is just burning that much more fuel. So the misconception is that if you're running slower, if you're running easier, you need to put less fuel back in. But that's a misconception. You actually need to put more back in if you're over 70 kilograms. So don't be fooled into thinking, oh, okay, I don't need to fuel as often. You do. In fact, you need to fuel more often. I guess my penultimate piece of fueling advice is quite a simple one. Take the plan seriously, have a plan and take it. There's no way you bring out all of that hard training over weeks and months without a really good fueling plan to match it, because if you just come into a marathon with no plan, or you disrespect the plan you have, then you're not going to do yourself justice. I think it's just that simple. Would you agree?
Totally. Gotta have the plan, gotta stick to it.
Gotta have the plan, gotta stick to it. And my final tip is, I think it's my final tip, unless I think of something else by the time I get to the finish line, but if you get to about this distance into a marathon and you're really struggling, oh, it's noisy, hang on. If you get to this distance in a marathon and you're really struggling, you know, don't be afraid to reach for the Coca-Cola that's on the table or the sweet drink or something. You know, if you're really struggling, what's the worst that can happen? You end up in a Portaloo, but you know, it could be the thing that saves your skin. So, in the depths of a race, reach for something that might help if you need it.
Gotta tell you, Buriram Marathon was amazing. We'll definitely be back. And if you want to know how to fuel after your race, then just eat carbohydrates and protein to recover. It's not rocket science. If you liked the video, then please first of all consider subscribing to the channel, as we are aiming for 1 million by tomorrow-ish. And also, I think you're going to like this video if you like this one, which was the one that started it all, the endurance diet based video with Matt Fitzgerald. And again, hopefully that'll help you dial in your diet for your running and get the best out of yourself. Thanks for watching. See you next week.